We've already had one comic book retailer say there's a 2-year window for Marvel and DC to fix their problems, or the comic book direct market cannot be saved. In fact, Chuck Rosansky has already stated it actually can't be saved. It's on an irreversible death spiral. We've had Tom Brevoort say, the industry is just changing now. It's changing with the times, and this is the way it's got to be. Heidi McDonald says, comic book retailers are actually doing great. Everything's just changing. And while I do agree that things are changing right now, and obviously evolution is a part of business, nothing is sustainable as it is forever. You do have to adapt with the times. Comic books do not have to die at this very moment. The direct market does not have to go away, but Marvel and DC, for some reason, will not correct course. Some would say they don't understand exactly what they're doing. It's not on purpose. They would like to keep the direct market going. They just don't know how to do it. To that, I would say, if Marvel and DC wanted to put comic book retailers out of business and move their business full-time from the direct market into bookstores, what would they do differently? Would they really not just price everybody out of the economy? Would they really lower page rates to the degree that all the superstars left? Would they not go out there and hire the most incompetent writers in the history of the world to write stories about characters no one cares about, or change the characters people do care about till they're unrecognizable? Would they not go out there and hire anybody with a shred of actual talent out there to be a comic book editor and just bring in interns and make them the editors and have them be the oversight and just destroy basically all the properties almost at the exact same time? What really would they be able to do differently? Would they not just continuously reboot everything into oblivion to where people no longer even feel there's a benefit for sticking around on an ongoing series? Would they not just constantly cancel things after 5 issues, even though they said it was going to be an ongoing series? I don't know what else they could do that they haven't done already to actually kill the direct market. And I do not agree that it's a foregone conclusion that the direct market has to die in the very near future, although some people, for some reason, have taken that stance. We did hear from some comic book retailers recently, as well as an editor on the old social medias. But first, I will talk about the retailers. We had Phil Boyle of Coliseum of Comics. We had John Robinson from Graham Crackers Comics, the big chain in Chicago, join Mark Millar this week to talk about some of the issues that they have. And I thought they were very smart. They didn't get into any of the culture war stuff. They just kind of talked about the business. And you could see there's a lot of problems. In fact, this is what Phil Boyle of Coliseum of Comics said. Our DC sales from 2022 to 2023 dropped 14%. Marvel dropped 8%. That may not sound terrible, but if we take out the ratio variance, which means the actual comics people are reading, DC is down 17% across my chains. Marvel is down 24%. Boom is down 73%. So we've had an awful lot of downturns. We've had a lot of people who are just tired of the fact there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of editorial oversight. There are a lot of retailers that have worked for damn near minimum wage for an awful lot of years because of the passion of what they loved. And unfortunately, that is being gutted. And as I put out before, where else can you get 2,000 people across America and more across the rest of the world who are willing to work for minimum wage, 50 and 60 hours a week to promote your product and pay you to do it? Basically pointing out the obvious that Marvel and DC and the other publishers out there take the direct market for granted. They take these retailers for granted. They take all the work that they put in there to actually keep comic books afloat for granted, and they are actively destroying the direct market as we speak. You can't sustain a comic book shop in 2023 and obviously moving into 2024 by selling comic books anymore. You have to do Magic the Gathering. You have to do tabletop gaming. You have to do Funko Pops. You have to do everything else in the world that could be part of a geek boutique just to keep your comic book shop alive. And Marvel and DC have been putting out so many bad things over the past 5 or 6 years. First, it started out with Marvel, and DC caught up really, really bad. And obviously, he points out the editorial oversight, the bad stories, the terrible continuity, the lackluster events that have no impact on anything is absolutely destroying people's will to go in every single Wednesday and pick up their favorite titles, because everything is meaningless. Nothing matters anymore. There's no characterization, even on a character like Batman. We're talking not just the flagship of DC, the flagship title for all of comic books. We can't get good, clear characterization and good, clear through lines on stories for Batman. We don't get that on Spider-Man. It's absolutely insane what these editors and writers have done to these characters. And as a byproduct of that, there is less interest from readers. In fact, a lot of readers are just ditching comic books in general. And it's because DC and Marvel have terrible oversight. They don't care about their characters and universes. They aren't trying to tell the best damn stories with the best heroes in the entire world anymore. I wish I could tell you what exactly I think they want to do with these characters, but I don't think they even know anymore. Ever since Dan Didio left DC Comics, there's no direction for the publisher. There's never been a clear direction for Marvel Comics under CB Cebulski, and they're just sitting there aimlessly hiring the most incompetent editors and writers in the world to come in and purposely, and I do believe it's purposely, for the most part, with a lot of these writers and editors, to destroy these characters because they just don't care. So Marvel, what do they do? What did DC do? And they didn't do this at all, just a few years ago, certainly during Rebirth. It's all variant covers. It's ratio variant covers. It's all about variant cover schemes to cover up the fact that they've pushed so much of their audience away. Phil Boyle says, yeah, if you take out the ratio variants, Marvel dropped 24%, a quarter. DC 17%. Damn near a fifth of their business is out the door across his 10 comic book stores in the state of Florida. Boom dropped 73%. There for a minute, it seemed like Boom was going to overtake IDW as the permanent number 4 publisher after Marvel, DC, and Image Comics, and apparently that is not the case. They were riding high there for a while, but apparently they just weren't able to keep up the momentum. I don't read a ton of Boom these days. I burn out on Something Is Killing the Children, and I never really jumped on board the Al Ewing stuff, so it's crazy that they were able to actually cut interest in their product at that scale. But really, that all ties back into Marvel and DC. If Batman's not hot, if Spider-Man's not hot, if X-Men aren't hot, if Avengers aren't hot, if Superman's not hot, if Justice League's not hot, why would people take a chance on a book by a secondary publisher? If I can't even get $5 worth of entertainment out of my favorite fucking character for my entire life, why am I going to trust these guys on a Mighty Morphin Power Ranger book? Why am I going to take any chances if they can't get the stuff that brought me through the door right to begin with? And that is an enormous problem. The variant ratio schemes are covering up, or at least attempting to cover up, a lot of the issues with driving people away. And now they can't even really do that anymore. A lot of people are in trouble. One of the big issues is they are constantly rebooting everything. I talked about it in Moon Knight this past week. Same writer, same artist, same storyline of Moon Knight. It does not continue on to Moon Knight number 31. No, we've got to reboot it to Vengeance of the Moon Knight number 1. So then we can reboot it 6 months later when Moon Knight comes back, just so we can have some schemes to reboot the series and get more number 1 issues. This is what John Robinson of Graham Crackers Comics had to say. Publishers don't realize how much time it takes to sell a single customer on signing up for a 4-issue miniseries. When these publishers constantly relaunch, sometimes twice in a year, I don't have the time to convince everyone. I know they stopped it. I know it's not the same creative team. Please sign up for this again. And I'm just losing slivers and slivers. I'm getting killed by 1 million paper cuts every single week, losing these customers because publishers will not stick with it. They reboot everything. It's very rare that a series even gets to 50 issues anymore. It's insane what they have done with their publishing strategy by constantly rebooting and rebooting. And if they don't think they can get an ongoing, and reboot it after 12 issues, they just do miniseries. And we've heard from Tom Brevoort. He talked about it in his Substack. He is a senior executive at Marvel Comics. He's been there 35 years. He's their longest tenured employee. He said it verbatim. It is fucking Substack. People want long form stories. Miniseries don't keep people around as far as sales go. Yet they continuously go back to this well of rebooting and getting number 1 issues. And DC Comics' new strategy when it comes to events is just so asinine. It sucks ass. You get the first issue, which is normally an alpha issue. Then you get the entire miniseries in the middle, which also reboots to a number 1 issue, although they didn't do that with Beast World, so I commend them for that one. Then it concludes with an Omega issue, and then in the meantime, it doesn't really connect to any of the ongoing stories or the characters that it's affecting within the event series itself. You just get a bunch of number 1 anthology books from writers no one cares about. And shockingly, people aren't investing in DC Comics events anymore. Marvel Comics events are so insane, it's not even funny. Gang War, which is simply just a bunch of gang leaders in New York City fighting Spider-Man and his friends, is 30 fucking issues. And it has 3 or 4 miniseries that all reboot to a number 1 issue. And of course, you had a first strike issue and you'll have a last strike issue. And it's just insane how much work they do to just get back to a number one issue because there's spec value. And sure, speculators are an important part of the economy of the ecosystem within comic book shops themselves, but you're absolutely destroying the relationship between comic book shops and the collectors themselves, the whales, the people that come in there and they buy enormous amounts of comics each and every week, not because there's a first appearance or maybe there's going to be a death in this comic book, which could prove to be valuable in 10 or 15 years, but because they like the characters, because they're fully invested in Marvel and DC, and they have just forsaken those people and assumed that they would never leave because they never did. Well, guess what? Time's up, and they did leave. You actually put enough bad writers on the stories. You fucked up the characterization enough to a degree that people actually gave up. You made the event so meaningless that people couldn't even really invest into them or the story or the universe and all that kind of stuff. And you ran off all the creators that could, in theory, bring somebody on for a number one issue, even if they don't like the character because they just like the creator. There are no superstars left, at Marvel and DC Comics for the most part. There are a couple people here and there, but they don't really even do ongoings anymore. And they have basically killed the periodic industry itself. Periodic storytelling doesn't really exist for the most part at DC or Marvel these days. When I read Beast World #1 from Tom Taylor, who I'm not a huge fan of, but tip the cap, he wrote a great comic book. Shockingly, there's a beginning, middle, and end to the story in one comic book issue. I didn't think modern writers could even do that anymore. And they have just completely fucked up the entire fundamentals of what has driven the comic book industry for 80 years. Starting with the newsstand and then spinner racks. And obviously, we're in the direct market era right now. And it appears Marvel and DC want us to get out of there, the direct market itself, as soon as possible. Now, there is somebody out there that is providing a little bit of context to this. Valerie D'Orazio used to be an editor and writer at Marvel and DC. Also did some editorial work back at MTV back in the day, probably when they still did music videos. Man, it's been a long time since they did that. But she was talking about this as somebody that was in the inside, part of the editorial staffs and whatever. She said the goal of a number of comics industry and media professionals has been for a while to see the direct market finally collapse, making bookstores and libraries the main places to carry comic book material. They want this to take place for several reasons. One, from a business perspective, it is much more likely for bookstores and libraries to purchase and support the specific material they produce. Number two, there's a class bias against direct market comic book stores in favor of the more dignified bookstores and library scenario. And we certainly saw that on full display over the past couple of weeks. I'm sure you remember when Glenn from Comic Book Palace went out there and was providing a little context of why he's hearing from his customers why comic books aren't doing so well. And he said, hey, there are far too many creators out there at Marvel and DC that want to write stories about themselves rather than the heroes. What did they do? The pros went out there and they said, look at the guy. Look at the way he looks. He's a salami-breathed hog. His shop looks like it smells like piss, and stale cigarette smoke, because they absolutely hate the direct market. They hate the fact that the majority of the fans of these characters and heroes and their work, because they're the ones working on it, happen to be middle-aged white dudes. And they absolutely hate that. They don't want to have to go to Bill's Kick-Ass Comics, in fucking Tennessee for a book signing. They want to be invited to Barnes and Noble. They want to go to the big store so they can do their book signing. They find it embarrassing to have to go there and talk to the actual fans, actual working class people that have been supporting the comic book industry for 8 fucking decades at this point. We are an embarrassment to them. That's why they've been trying to push us away for so long. And I do believe a lot of this is by design. And I think Valerie is speaking a lot of truth there. There is a lot more information if you go and find that social media post where she goes into there, where she explains it a lot more. I just don't have the time because it was quite substantial. And I do appreciate her shining some light on the subject, but they hate us. They hate the direct market, and they've gone out of their way to make it not a viable market. We cannot give up on this. We actually have to keep fighting. We have to go out there and find the series at work, go and support back issues, and help these guys out because they're being screwed over by Marvel and DC. We're not the ones screwing over the retailers. It's the creators, it's the editors, it's the publishers themselves because they want us gone. Well, I ain't leaving. Screw that. This is my little hobby. This is my little slice of the world, and they ain't going to take it away from me because they think I'm a salami-breathed hog or whatever. These guys are absolute assholes, and DC and Marvel are absolutely making the direct market collapse. And I think a lot of this is by design. And these are very important stories that need to be talked about. There needs to be a light shown on these things as far as the people that are going out there and doing this stuff on purpose. And I'm glad to do it. And like I said, I'm not walking away. You can't make me walk away from something I love because you don't think I look right. You don't like my race, my gender. You don't like my sexual orientation. Screw you. That's got nothing to do with it. This is about saving comic books at this point. And I'm definitely here for the long haul. And I love pointing out what's not working in comic books, but I also love pointing out what is working with comic books. And I definitely enjoy interacting with all of you guys and the fact that you are not giving up on comic books as well. If you would like to continue supporting the little guy and have these conversations in more full, I do have the Patreon. I would definitely invite you guys to go check it out. We have a lot more discussions there about what's going on in comic books, what comic books are absolutely worth reading right now, and a lot more conversations that I think a lot of you will enjoy, and bigger things coming up in 2024 as well. So definitely check out that link. And definitely thank you very much for showing up today.